Good evening and welcome. This is Spotlight Africa, brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. I am Uyai Anekan. Today on Spotlight Africa, Gabon junta promises free elections in August 2025. Kenya and Sudan seek to expedite slow Jeddah talks. South Africa police arrest 3 for child pornography and bestiality. Nigeria to withdraw police from VIP security duty. Plus, United Kingdom Dr. Ahmed Sabra finally gets to Egypt from Gaza. These stories are all just ahead on Spotlight Africa. Do stay with us. Thanks for joining us first on Spotlight Africa. Gabon's military leaders who deposed President Ali Bongo Ondimba in August announced today that elections would be held in August 2025 under a timetable that first foresees national dialogue. Reports say the conference, scheduled for April 2024, will be made up of all the country's vital actors. Recall that Ali Bongo, 64, who had ruled the Central African country since 2009, was overthrown by military leaders on August 30, moments after being proclaimed the winner in a presidential election, which both the army and the opposition declared fraudulent. Meanwhile, Gabon's new Prime Minister Raymond Dong Sima has said that a 2-year transition before the free elections promised by the country's new military rulers was a reasonable objective. Dong Sima was appointed as head of the transitional government by General Brice Oligui Nguema, who led the coup d'etat against Ali Bongo Ondimba. In another development, Sudan's military ruler Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan has met Kenya President William Ruto in Nairobi after initially rejecting the latter as the lead mediator on a war in the Northeast African nation. The Kenya presidency website said on Monday that the two leaders held bilateral talks on the recent security situation in Sudan and the region. They also reviewed the state of ongoing peace initiatives, including the Jeddah and Intergovernmental Authority on Development (IGAD) peace processes. Recall that talks between the Sudanese army and rivals from the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) resumed in the Saudi port city on the 26th of October, but mediators, including the United States, Saudi Arabia, IGAD, and African Union, failed to compel both sides to uphold a ceasefire. Ruto and General Burhan called for an acceleration of the slow Jeddah talks and a dialogue framework through IGAD. General Burhan previously rejected Kenyan-led mediation efforts after accusing Ruto of backing the RSF, which has been at war with the Sudanese army since mid-April. Meanwhile, the RSF has denied responsibility for the killings of hundreds of ethnic Masalit in West Darfur State after the group seized the army headquarters there earlier this month. The RSF blamed the Sudan army instead. Meanwhile, Kenya's Transport Minister and Airports Authority have come under fire online following complaints of leaking roofs at the terminals of the main airport, Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. The post prompted more complaints about the airport's poor state, which has been worsened by ongoing heavy rains. The airport also faced criticism last weekend after its management announced that it took 20 minutes to restore power there, following a nationwide blackout that hit Kenya for a few hours on Saturday night. Meanwhile, neither the Airport Authority nor the Transport Minister have commented on the complaint. Recall that last week, Transport Minister Kim Chuba Bukomen promised to improve services at the airport after separate complaints of passenger harassment by tax officers. In the meantime, the latest negotiations toward a global treaty to combat plastic pollution opened in Nairobi, with tensions expected as nations tussle over what should be included in the pact. According to reports, some 175 countries agreed last year to conclude by 2024 a United Nations treaty to address the plastic blighting oceans, floating in the atmosphere and infiltrating the bodies of animals and humans. While there in broad consensus, a treaty is needed, there are very different opinions about what should be in the treaty. Meanwhile, as the talks formally open, Peru's Gustavo Meza Cuadra, chair of the forum's Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, warned that plastic pollution posed a direct threat to the environment, human health, and the delicate balance of the planet. Meanwhile, Kenyans have been given a special holiday to plant 100 million trees as part of the government's goal to plant 15 billion trees in 10 years. The Environment Minister Sopa Ntuya said the holiday allows each and every Kenyan to own the initiative of planting at least 2 seedlings, leading to the 100 million target. Tuya said the tree planting will be monitored through an internet app which monitors the exercise by allowing individuals and organizations to record activities, including the plant species, number, and date planted. We'll take a quick break. When we return, Spotlight Africa continues.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
For brilliant broadcasts and entertainment, sports on the go, and news around the world, watch Spectrum TV on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and free-to-air frequency 12733. Visit our website, SpectrumTVLive.ng. Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Thanks for staying tuned in. Now to the rest of the news stories on Spotlight Africa. In Liberia, voting in presidential runoff election after the 2 leading candidates were separated by just over 7,000 votes in the first round a month ago is about to recommence. They are choosing between incumbent and one-time football star George Weah and former Vice President Joseph Boakai. The president narrowly won the first round but failed to get more than 50% of the vote, triggering the runoff. Recall that voting in October was fraught with allegations of fraud and violence. Meanwhile, the Election Commission said that 9 of its temporary staff had been arrested over alleged ballot tampering. In a separate development, the European Union has called for an investigation into the reported killing of around 100 people in Burkina Faso last week. The EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, in a statement, said around 100 civilians, including women and children, were killed in a massacre. Reports say Burkina Faso is trying to contain a jihadist insurgency that spread from neighboring Mali. The military government has been allegedly forcing civilians to join the fight against the Islamist groups, who are said to control about 40% of the country. We move now to South Africa, where a sudden and intense hailstorm struck several parts of Johannesburg on Monday evening, blocking highways and damaging gardens, vehicles, car parks, buildings, roads and other property. Johannesburg Emergency Management Services spokesperson Robert Mwaldazi told reporters that flash floods from the storm hit some parts of the city, but that no injuries or fatalities had been recorded. He added that authorities had provided emergency services to affected families and would remain on high alert to respond to any reported incidents. Forecaster Jacqueline Modica from the South African Weather Service told newsmen that the weather would likely spill over to Tuesday, but with reduced intensity. Meanwhile, South African Police Service says it arrested 3 men accused of sexually abusing 3 children and a dog in an operation conducted with the aid of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security last week. The suspects include a 63-year-old British citizen who was in the country illegally. Police say he will be charged with bestiality, child grooming, and several counts related to child pornography, including manufacturing and distributing child pornographic materials. The second and third suspects, both 43-year-old South Africans, will also be charged on several counts of child pornography. The police added that the suspects appeared in court on Monday, but that their cases were postponed for further investigation and bail applications. In another development, a UK doctor who was stuck in war-torn Gaza when his name was left off a list of British nationals has finally reached Egypt. Ahmed Sabra, a UK citizen who holds a British passport, was visiting family in Gaza with his wife and 3 children at the start of the war. His wife and children were allowed to cross into Egypt on Thursday, but Dr. Sabra was turned away. The Foreign Office said it was working to get all British nationals home. Dr. Sabra, a consultant cardiologist at Pinderfield Hospital in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, who was a cardiology rheumatographer at the hospital, Swansea, said he had made it through the Rafah crossing on Monday and was waiting to get his passport stamped. Moving away from that, Nigeria will withdraw police officers from VIP security duties in line with a presidential directive. State Minister of Police Affairs Hajia Iman Suleiman said the police force was currently struggling following decades of neglect that had hampered its ability to fulfill its constitutional mandate. She said in order to realize the president's vision of a renewed, highly effective force, the police would have to evolve its operations. She told the police to champion a review of its training institutions to ensure they are reflective of the evolving landscape of law enforcement, incorporating contemporary practices and international standards. She spoke during a 2-day retreat with the police cadre in the capital, Abuja. Meanwhile, more than 170 Nigerians on a flight to Saudi Arabia were turned back on arrival on Monday after the Saudi authorities reportedly abruptly revoked their visas. Reports say that 264 passengers who had departed from the Nigerian cities of Lagos and Kano had received visas and undergone rigorous screenings prior to boarding. However, all their visas were reportedly revoked while they were airborne. Reports say on arrival, the Saudi authorities reportedly refused to grant entry and instructed the Nigerian Air Peace Airline to return them to Nigeria. Meanwhile, the Saudi authorities have not commented on the matter. Affected passengers told local media that they were surprised to learn of the visa cancellation when they landed, as they had met all the requirements for entry into the Middle East country. Saudi Arabia is said to have ultimately allowed entry to 87 passengers after intervention by the Nigerian embassy. They rather deported 177 who were repatriated back to Nigeria on Monday night. Nigerian media reports say most of the passengers had traveled to Saudi Arabia to perform the Lesser Hajj Umrah pilgrimage to the Islamic holy city of Mecca. Moving on from there, the authorities in Mauritania say the bodies of 16 people thought to be migrants have been found on the country's northern coast. The discovery on the beaches of La Guera comes a week after 13 corpses were found in boats in the same area near the city. The latest incident appears to have happened after their boat hit some rocks. Recently, there has been a sharp increase in the number of people setting off from neighboring Senegal in a bid to reach Spain's Canary Islands. Reports say since January, more than 23,000 people have arrived there by boat. In another development, a Zimbabwe opposition activist who was abducted at the weekend while campaigning ahead of key by-elections has been found dead. Tamfuli Masaya's body was found in a decomposed state on the outskirts of the capital Harare. His party, the Citizens Coalition for Change, had reported. In a statement, the police confirmed the location of a body but said the identity of the dead person was yet to be established and more details would be released later. The CCC says the activists had been forced into a vehicle by armed men on Saturday while campaigning for a party candidate ahead of the December 9 polls. The by-elections are being held following what the party said was an illegal and fraudulent recall of its members. Last month, over a dozen opposition members of parliament lost their seats after a man who declared himself as the party's interim secretary general said the members of parliament were no longer members. In a separate development, former Ivory Coast Prime Minister Guillaume Soro, who took himself into exile in 2019, says he plans to return home despite having 2 criminal convictions. He said on Sunday that he wanted to go back because it was hard to live far from his ancestral land of Africa. He added that he wanted to contribute to the reconciliation of the country. It will be recalled that in 2021, an Ivorian court sentenced Soro in absentia to life imprisonment for undermining national security. The previous year, he had been sentenced to 20 years on charges relating to the embezzlement of public funds. Away from that, a former gynecologist from Rwanda has gone on trial in France on charges of genocide and crimes against humanity. In 1995, a year after the Rwandan genocide, a complaint was filed against Sosithine Munyemana in the city of Bordeaux. Reports say it took French prosecutors 28 years to bring the case to trial. Munyemana, who has lived in France since 1994, is accused of organizing torture and killings. He was a 29-year-old gynecologist living in the south of Rwanda at the time of the genocide. In another development, the company's South Africa head Alistair Mokoena said the Google navigation apps Waze and Google Maps will stop directing road users through Cape Town's Nyanga township and surrounding areas amid rising insecurity. Recall that last week, an American tourist was robbed and shot in the face in Nyanga after a navigation app directed him to drive through the township as it offered the most direct route to the city from the Cape Town International Airport. In September, 40-year-old British surgeon Kahal Ter was shot dead in the same township during a protest by taxi operators. Local media say a few other people, mostly tourists, have been attacked or killed while driving through the township, some of who were following the recommendations of navigation apps. Lastly, today on Spotlight Africa, Madagascar's collective Day 6 opposition coalition of 10 parties has called on voters to boycott Thursday presidential election amid worsening political tension that is engulfing the country. Reports say 10 of the 13 presidential candidates registered for the election have been demanding an overhaul of the country's highest court and the Electoral Commission before the polls take place. They allege that incumbent President Andry Rajoelina, who is seeking re-election, is ineligible due to the French citizenship he acquired in 2014, an accusation he has dismissed. Meanwhile, the leader of the lower house of parliament, who is a member of the president's own party, has also called for the vote to be suspended as the conditions were not right. Reports say over the past 6 weeks, hundreds of opposition supporters have continued to hold banned marches in the capital, Antananarivo, which police have routinely dispersed using sheer gas. They have also arrested some opposition supporters. And that's all we have for you today on Spotlight Africa, bringing you news all around the continent. This has been brought to you by Spectrum Television and Planet Radio. You can do well to follow us across all social media platforms, all of which you can find at SpectrumTv Live, or do well to follow us at planetradio.ng. I am Uyai Aneka, and thanks for being a part of this, and do enjoy the rest of your evening.